Gwilym, hello mate. It's been a little while since I saw you. Tell a lie. We were in a pub last night. But apart from that, it's been a little while since I've seen you.
Yeah, it has been. We would have seen each other a lot more, except for the podcast on Monday that you, for good reason, weren't able to attend.
So terribly unfair of you.
But the good news is that you'll be able to listen to it soon and hear what we said about you.
It was just one of those, I don't have many mental aberrations in my life, but it was just one of those times where because you said you'll do something in the evening, and my calendar seems to never scroll far enough up my screen to see the evening stuff. And someone just sent me a message saying, "Do you fancy a game of squash?" I even messaged you and told you I was going to play squash. And at no time did you stop me and say, "Hey, you've got to be on this podcast."
Well, because anyway, anyway, let's not. This is friendly banter. Um, the no, we should probably actually mention what that podcast was about though, because it's quite cool, isn't it?
Well, you'll have to because I wasn't there, so I don't know.
Fair point. Well, that's what it was. It was a weird time. So our informals are going to do some podcasts aimed at the issues that are of real interest to people training within the profession, and everyone else too, I suspect, because there's a whole bunch of cool stuff around the pressures of exams, mental health issues, getting a job, all that kind of stuff. So really interesting. And they're doing it under the 2IP banner. Because it works for everybody and it's a great idea. So they're going to be taking over, and on Monday night, they were basically interviewing us. Well,
Are
me.
you? Yeah, yeah. But that's a good experience for them in taking over, isn't it? Because they did have to take over because I wasn't there.
No, they did a great. They did a really, really good job. It was a fun one. I find it frankly really weird not being the host, and I kept asking questions.
So I promise you, I'll not let you down again. Yeah,
I
that's
do
not
know
happening
that.
again.
I do know that.
I was truly mortified.
I
Um,
know.
Especially as I didn't realise until I was checking my phone in the bar, and then realised how many calls I'd missed.
You
So I did join you with a pint in my hand. To be
looking
fair,
mortified with a pint.
yeah.
Yes.
Lee Davis and Gwilym Roberts are the two IPs in a pod, and you are listening to a podcast on intellectual property, brought to you by the Chartered Institute of Patent Attorneys.
Should we get today's podcast on the road? Would that be a good thing to do? Because I'm always conscious that we have a guest lurking in the background when we're doing the chatty stuff, and they either know us or don't know us, and kind of have probably never heard this sort of thing before. So I probably sat there thinking, "Oh, what am I doing here?" Or, "Oh, I'm really excited about this." Nikkei, which are you? Are you really, really excited, or are you thinking, "What have I let myself in for?"
I'm not sure. I'm somewhere in the middle.
Do you want to do us the biggest favour and give yourself a really amazing introduction? Can you do that?
I'll try. My name is Nike. It's spelled Nike. I know it does sound like Nike, but it is Nike. Last name's Folayan. I am an engineer by day and an engineer by night.
So you don't transform at night, then you're just the same person permanently.
Yeah, apparently so. I wear many hats, and so outside of my day job as a technical director within a company called WSP, I'm the co-founder of an organization called the Association for Black and Minority Ethnic Engineers UK. I know it's a really long name, but yeah, there's a reason why we have that long name.
Yeah. So where should we start? Should we start with how you got into engineering, how you became an engineer?
Right. So I became an engineer because I loved television, believe it or not. And when I was much younger, I used to wonder how the little people images on the television, how the little people got in there. And I used to, we had this old type TV so that you could see like the printed circuit boards through the vents. And I used to try and poke on the printed circuit board, thinking maybe the people might come out and play with me, and so I'd have friends. Not really, but yeah, I used to kind of wonder how that happened. And my dad would say, "Oh, it's an aerial, and I couldn't kind of quite work out how you had a piece of metal connected to something and you'd have images, and that's what really got me interested in engineering. However, at the time, I didn't think or know it was engineering. I
Yeah.
thought it was something else.
That's really cool. Yeah, it's interesting you talked about having friends in the TV. Gwilym, I had a friend in the fireplace when I was younger. It's just reminded me of that. George. Imagine a friend who lived in the fireplace called George.
Was it? Oh, hang on. Was it George Brazier? I'm here all week.
You see how good he is. See how good he is. So how did you find finding how did you experience finding your place in the engineering world? Sort of, did you go it alone? Did you find that was it an apprenticeship? Did you go through the higher education route?
Yeah, I went through the higher education route, but at the time I went because my brother is an engineer and we co-founded the organization together. He's also an engineer and my dad was an engineer as well. However, when I did mention that I was considering engineering, so I'd been surrounded all my life with engineering. My dad showed me the car, how it works and so on and so forth. And he talked through the parts and I was always very interested. But I just knew that I thought, well, if that's engineering, I don't want to do that. It's interesting, but hey, I don't want to be fixing someone's car. I don't want to be doing any of that. But when I then discovered that electronics, which is what I was really interested in, was linked to engineering. And I said to my mum, yeah, this is what I want to do. And she's like, nope, not a good idea. It's not for girls. It's not for girls. You must do something more creative, like architecture. And I was thinking, I don't have the patience for architecture. You have to have a level of patience to actually plan and design something. But she said that for very good reasons. One, because there were not that many women in engineering, and certainly there were not that many people of color in engineering that were successful and progressive. And she knew me as someone that had a real drive for progress and success. So she was sort of saying it to protect me, but at the time it just seemed like, Ollie's doing it. Why can't I? Ollie's my brother, not just some random name. Why can't I do that? And so it was a really tough conversation. And I started to realize what she was saying when I started my course, and there were only 4 girls on my course. And then lots of things happened that kind of took my confidence away in terms of thinking I shouldn't be there. And many times having to prove myself more than anybody else because I felt like that's what I needed to do to show that I could be a good engineer. And but I stayed on and I'm still an engineer today.
If I could be really probing with a question and sort of tell me if this is kind of like a question too far.
Yeah.
So was that like a multiple experience? So were you experiencing that because you were female, because you were black? So it was conflating sort of issues.
That's right. It was a kind of an intersection. This is where intersectionality
intersection, that's the word. I knew there was a word. That's right. Because half the time I'm thinking, is it because I'm female? And then I kind of think, actually, especially when I felt it was about being female for a long time until I got into the workplace, really. And I realized, okay, maybe it's not just about being female. It's about being someone from a different ethnicity and having to fit into this environment. Because I remember walking into my first job and on the first day realizing I was on a floor of about 100 men and I was the only female, and certainly, the only female engineer. And then realized that, the other ethnic minority women on the floor were treated better than myself, who was the only female engineer on the floor. And I thought, hang on, really confused. And because of the way that we've been brought up to say, well, if you work hard, you're going to achieve and you're going to excel, I could not understand why I wasn't loved by everyone. I'm such a lovable character, right? So yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Walking into plays and realizing, well, you're not everyone's favorite person was very, very strange to me, because I thought all I had to do was really be a really good engineer, have the talent, showcase my talent, and that would have been enough. But walking in and realizing that there was more to it than that was kind of the moment I started to think, well, maybe it's not just about the fact that I'm female. Maybe it's because, of my ethnicity as well. And what was strange was, because my brother had been in the industry for at least 4 or 5 years before I joined, I talked to my brother thinking, well, he may be able to give me some advice, but he was in actually worse situations and where he was working in his organization. And that was a moment for us. That was a real moment for us to realize that, okay, there was a challenge around ethnicity and this engineering workspace, and we needed to do something to change it.
Was that when you sort of started to think about the initiative, the association?
That's right.
So right back then.
Yes. So it was it was a situation whereby we were in workplaces that were really hostile to us. I had a line manager who I often fondly call Demon, who treated me so badly that I went to the ladies every day and had a cry and just came back and tried to build up my confidence, because he'd say the most awful things for no reason. And then Ollie was having kind of similar experience in his workplace. But at the same time, we were in London and there was a lot of gang culture and crime happening in London. And the prime minister at the time, I won't name who the prime minister was, but you can easily guess this happened around 2007, then said gang culture, the black culture was responsible for murders in London. And so can you imagine having your prime minister say that sort of thing, and then you have to go into work where they already think you're really weird the next Monday, and someone, you know that someone's going to say, oh, did you hear that? Oh, what do you think? And, having to explain that, it isn't about the culture, it isn't about the people, it's about, certain things going wrong in the community. It's about stereotypes that we have to change. There are lots of successful people from our community doing great things. And that's when we started to talk and started to think, well, we'll do something to change that stereotype. We'll do something to engage our young people to think about the things that they can do within the STEM sector, particularly engineering, but also to raise leaders from our communities within those sectors, so as visible role models for young people to see as well.
That's really fascinating. I mean, we started this conversation back in lockdown. So we're telling you in the sort of the build up for the podcast that Gwilym and I started this almost 3 years ago now in lockdown. And one of the conversations we were having then, and I got some of my staff to come on. I've got a number of staff from Black and minority ethnic communities, and they came on and on an early podcast to us and started to talk quite openly about their experiences. And so these are people that I work with on a daily basis. These are people with whom I think we have an amazing kind of community at SEPA. We pride ourselves in our inclusivity. I pride myself particularly in the way that I lead that. And to hear people tell stories that were actually so shocking about experiences they'd had in previous employers, experiences that they still have daily in their lives because of their cultural background, their colour, whatever it might be. It was such an eye opener to me.
Yeah,
I've been learning a lot through this podcast as well, actually, and I think I remember that episode very strongly, and I remember realizing just how comfortable I am in my privilege. When one of the questions from the attendees to each other was not, have you ever had to deal with racism? It was, what happened to you when you had to deal with racism? It was an absolute assumption that they'd been through it, and it was always I just sat there thinking, gosh, I need to listen a bit more and learn a bit more.
It's a thing that for a long time, actually, between myself and Ollie, when all the things were happening to us when we joined the industry, we sort of internalized it and kept thinking, it can't be about my color, it can't be about my ethnicity, it must be something else. And you work hard and you do everything and it's still a problem, and you talk to other people from similar backgrounds and they're telling you the same sorts of stories, and then you start to see a pattern and you start to think, well, maybe it is about this, and maybe someone needs to talk about it and someone needs to do something about it. And that's partly why we created a platform, to allow people to see people that they can relate to and see that it is possible to be successful within our sector, regardless of your background.
Tell us a little bit about that. What do you actually do? How do you engage people in this way?
So we have what we call a cradle to grave approach. So we start right from primary school. We have a program called Next Gen. It's called Next Gen in Scotland because we run across the UK. It's called Next Gen in Scotland, but it's called Making Engineering Hot in England. And we were actually thinking about Making Engineering Sexy when we started. But we thought it might be difficult to go into a school and say, well, we're here to make engineering sexy to your young people. That might be a bit of a difficult sell. So we call it Make Engineering Hot. And the idea of that program is to go to communities that are considered at risk, where there are lots of young people at risk of becoming not in education or employment and training. Go to communities where, for example, in London, we'd look at things like the London poverty line and go to those communities, because what we found is that the experiences of there's a high link between social class and ethnicity, but also the experience of young people in those areas are quite similar. The disadvantages that they face in the industry, regardless of ethnicity, are quite similar. And so we go to those areas and we talk to them about possibilities of becoming engineers. We give them opportunities for internship, work placements, and so on. And then we just show them that they're role models from all backgrounds that come from these communities. Some of the times we're lucky to get someone that has been to particular school and is able to go back and talk about their experiences joining the industry and encourage the young people. So that's one of our programs. But we also do a program called Transition. And that program in particular looks at young people transitioning into the industry, because within engineering, only 9% of engineers are from a Black and minority ethnic background. However, the number of engineering students studying to become engineers within universities, that percentage from an ethnic minority background is 33%. So,
yeah, so this is the leaky pipeline thing, isn't it?
So there's a really high percentage of people from ethnic minority backgrounds studying to become engineers, but somehow they don't get into the industry. And there was a report by Engineering UK back in 2019 that showed that if you are a white male, you're 71% more likely to get an engineering graduate job within 12 months post-graduation. If you're Black male, you're only 58% likely to get into an engineering role within 12, so those are the things that we're trying to work through our transition program. So bringing industry along with students, giving them the opportunities to network, but also kind of creating an environment where people in our industry see people from a variety of backgrounds and realize that talent is available in all communities. And then we have programs for professionals. At the moment, we're working towards our a national conference in April called AFB Live, where we're talking about the future of engineering and how we use human-centric solutions to make engineering, the future of engineering, better than the one that is planned at the moment.
Can I know I'm going to let Gwilym come in at some point, but I'm really fascinated at the moment. Normally it's always about IP, Nike, and he's kind of always talking about technical patent stuff and that, and I have to sit here and suffer in silence. So I'm having my voice on this one.
Enjoy.
But just to kind of bring the world of IP in a little bit, you were talking about sort of showcasing the potential future career opportunities for people once they get into the engineering pathway. Do you ever use the world of IP as one of those potential futures? Because of course, patent attorneys always have a technological background. A big kind of chunk of those will be engineers.
Yes.
So do you showcase our world?
What's interesting is that we have a program called Real Projects, and that program is the ethos of that program is to help people see the possibilities when they actually enter the industry. Because as a student, you're studying to be an engineer. You think, well, I'm just going to be an engineer, and you don't really know what it entails. So our Real Projects offer actually looks at technical conversations around different pathways into engineering, but also different topics. And one of the topics that we had 2 years ago was a IP lawyer who had studied engineering, had actually worked as an engineer for a fair few years, and had decided that this is what she wanted to do. And for me, that was the first time I'd ever heard of it. So it was just like mind-blowing, like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe that this is possible. And lots of people that attended that session were, quite senior people within the profession that didn't actually know there was this really strong link between IP and engineering. So yeah, we have had a session.
If we can do any more for you in that regard, you only need to kind of ask. I mean, we obviously we could put up lots of people who could talk about all kinds of extraordinary career paths that they've taken out of engineering and into IP law. And I'd be really, really pleased to work with you on that.
Yes, that would take up, but that's opportunity, definitely. Thank you.
It also bridges a problem an issue that we've identified, which is very similar to what you're saying about the leaky pipeline stuff, is that we have good, reasonable gender diversity in the profession. Well, I think I can say that, but ethnicity is not so strong. And I think we've had at least 3 podcasts trying to find ways around this, actually, because it's so important. We've had the Generating Genius, if you know about them. They've been on personal kind of pet love of mine, the thing called the Access Project, where you can give if you're aware of it, you give tutoring to people from different communities and stuff like that, which is something that I do personally. I think I'm very proud of. And also we have our IP kind of inclusivity body, IP Inclusive, which is very, very heavily involved in this whole area and really kind of leveling the constituency a lot more. So
Right.
it's quite interesting to kind of get another link like this.
Yes.
Lee, there's loads we can, as you say, there's loads we can be doing, putting stuff together.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
it's almost kind of like we're not going to end the podcast here. Clearly, we're not. But it's almost like end the podcast here and get on with some work now and sort of make this happen.
That's right. Because the number of times I meet, really kind of people that have, engineering degrees, and they don't really know sometimes they don't really know what's next because no one's given them the insight into what's possible. Is or people that work in engineering are looking for something different to kind of do as well. Yeah. So this is a really good way of accessing another space that they wouldn't have known about at all. So yeah.
We're definitely going to follow this up. Where do we go next, Gwilym? Where do you want to take the podcast next?
Oh, that's about the famous bit. You're quite famous. It's really cool.
I get a bit awkward when people say that's like,
no, it's great. I'm starstruck. No, so I saw that you've got an MBE. What's that like, getting an MBE?
To be honest, it was good to get recognized. It was good to get recognized after, I got the MBE after 15 years of starting AFBE. And for me, whilst it was great, for me, really, it's when sometimes I meet people that have, were 15 when I met them and now work in the industry, have worked in for a few years. And that emotion to me is greater, shall I say, than, getting the MBE. The MBE was great because it was a great recognition and it just made people look up and notice that, okay, there's this organization there doing this great work. But to me, it's always been more about, when you meet people that you've impacted with the work that you're doing, it just then makes sense, and it kind of keeps you going. Because I do know sometimes people get these honors and then you never hear about them again because they got the honor now. They don't need to do anything else. So yeah, but it was great, and it was by I was awarded by Princess Anne, who is obviously a big advocate of engineers and female engineers, and we had such a great discussion in that short moment about the work that she was doing and within the engineering space and so on, to encourage more people of diverse backgrounds to be engineers. So yeah, it was great, and it was a great day at Windsor, especially because it was just that after the COVID lockdown that I actually got awards. So yeah, that was great.
That's cool. Sorry, I got excited by that. Sorry.
I thought you were going to talk about the Lewis Hamilton connection. I thought that's where you might have been going.
Well, that was on my list.
What's that been like?
Oh no, that was to be honest. I just remember when I got the email saying, "Oh, would you like to join?" I was just like, "No, this is a scam. It can't be Lewis Hamilton. Come on," And so I looked at it and I thought, no, this. I mean, I responded and I said, yeah, thanks for this opportunity, and I'll have a think whether I would join. I mean, like, who has a think about something like that? But I did that because I just wanted to test my take a moment to test my the reason why I was doing it again, because I do that often where I want to make sure that I'm doing it for the right reason. And I thought, okay, I can bring value to this commission. This is something I'm passionate about. I have been doing it for many, many years, and I can bring my expertise in this area to the commission. So we joined the commission. It was during lockdown. So a lot of the initial meetings were via Zoom, actually. And it was just such the energy in that space of people just kind of really passionate about changing the status quo. And at the time, we didn't even realize that it was just 1% of people within the motorsport space industry are of Black heritage, only 1%. We didn't even know of 40,000 people that work in that industry. But everyone was really passionate and we just wanted to make it work. And from that commission has come the work with Mission 44, and they're doing some really fantastic work all across the UK to raise aspiration, to engage people in the motorsports industry. In fact, they organized that in collaboration with the Royal Academy of Engineering. They have a master's scholarship program where they're getting young people that couldn't otherwise afford the opportunities to go and do a master's in motorsports engineering the opportunity, and I'm part of that process still. So yeah, it's been fantastic. And just hearing from Lewis himself, having the opportunity, I presented alongside Lewis to the team principals of all the 10, is it 12? I never know, of the F1 companies. And that was a very daunting experience, but very, very rewarding. And just to get the opportunity to actually share my message of let's all be inclusive to those sorts of people was kind of just a real privilege for me.
So bringing it back to our world for a moment. So we've talked about the fact that patent attorneys come from these kind of diverse engineering technological backgrounds, and Gwilym's alluded to the fact that we've still got work to do in terms of making sure that so we would say that we've opened the profession up. We would say that we're more inclusive. We've done everything that we can to reduce the barriers, but we're always recruiting from the available pool of graduates. So it's difficult for us to influence directly how universities go about ensuring that they themselves are diverse. Any tips for us? Any kind of hot takeaways? Things that we could do to really make a difference?
I think you're already doing some of those things, like getting involved really early. I think the mistake that a lot of industries and organizations make is that they assume people will come to them. So if you spoke to an engineering company, they'd say, well, they didn't apply. And my answer to that is, well, where did you advertise? How did you approach them? When did you approach them? What have you done to show this, give them a sense of belonging? You go on some companies that are saying, well, we're really diverse. You go on their websites and everyone that you see doesn't look like you. You look at their boards, their leadership boards. AFE, for example, did a survey back in 2017 and looked at the top 100 engineering companies. And we found that only 2.3% of those companies have anyone of diverse heritage on their board of directors. So immediately, if I look at a website and I look at a company's website and I look at their board and everybody else, no one looks like me, I'm more likely to think, well, I'm never ever going to progress to that level. So I don't want to work in that company, or I don't want to stay in that company, even if I go and work for them. And, so those sorts of things, getting engaged really early, starting really early, looking to engage the community and give them a sense of belonging by ensuring that your recruitment process and your attraction process are as diverse as possible, and actually nurturing those that you have within your organization. Because I always say that the best marketing tool for organizations are the people that work for them. If I've had a good experience in an organization, I'm more likely to talk to people from my community about joining this organization. Yeah. Now, if I had a bad experience, it's the same thing that happens. So what's ending up happening, especially within the engineering space, is that the engineering industry is thinking that, well, we're advertising and they're not coming. But the truth is, where are you advertising? How are you advertising? How have you invested in the community? How can they know that they can trust you?
I had a question kind of to do with showing people that, anyone can be in this business and everything else. It's more to do with the retention side, which is something that really interests me, because even when, as a profession, we get candidates in from diverse backgrounds, sometimes they don't stay. And I think often it's because it's just a very weird, it's not weird, it is what it is. It's a very alien workplace. It's not maybe something they've had experience of. Presumably the internships help kind of get people into the idea of what that particular workplace might be. But again, on the tips front, what are we doing wrong when we get people in from diverse backgrounds, but then for some reason we don't quite know why they don't like it and it's just not working for them?
No, thank you. That's a really good question. We did, AFE did a survey of the life cycle of what it takes, for example, to become an engineer. And we looked at the different drop-off points where we lose people within the space. And retention, as you say, is one of those key areas where a lot of people come into a work environment and kind of think, well, this is not for me. And that goes back to safe spaces. People feel sometimes when they go into this environment, they feel that they have to change who they are to fit into the organization. Sometimes it's a sense of belonging, that they don't feel that they can just be themselves. It happened to me in the industry when I joined the industry. At a point, I used to be called the mumbler because I couldn't get my words out, because I was always scared that if I said something, it might be the wrong thing. And so I'd mumble a lot. And so I could have left the industry at that point, but because I'm just really kind of, if you say no, that's exactly what I'm going to do. It's why I kind of stayed in the industry. But that tends to happen to lots of people, that they join the industry and they feel that there isn't that sense of belonging or acceptance. And once they are able to walk away, they don't want to look back because there isn't that sense of belonging. And so what organizations can do is, one, present environments where people can feel safe to be who they are, obviously within reason, but be who they are, and value, and their value is determined not by how they say things, but what they say. Oftentimes, value in our societies are determined by how you say things. If you speak in a particular way, if you sound a particular way, if you're in tune with the culture of that organization. And really, it should be about making sure that the culture is inclusive enough to allow the creativity to happen, regardless of how you say or how you come across, and that you can bring your whole self to work. There's other issues around transparency, people feeling that they're not getting the progression that they want, and feeling they're not able to talk about things like progression within work environments, and is partly why they leave. From a gender perspective as well, I know that particularly in engineering, a lot of women, when they do decide that they want to have children or whatever, they think that, well, I don't know whether I want to come back to this environment. And that's not because they've had children and that makes them not want to be in that environment, but because they've never had a sense of belonging when they were there. Yeah. When they had the opportunity to walk away, they think, well, I don't want to go back to that environment because, well, I never belonged there anyway. So it is really about creating a system where people feel safe enough to be who they are, so that they can bring their creativity and they're valued for that creativity, rather than trying to fit into a culture that means that they have to change who they are to be accepted.
Nike, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute delight. We're kind of coming towards the end, but Gwilym and I always like to make sure the podcast goes on a wee bit longer by asking the odd tangential question. So will you entertain us while we do I'm going to do a couple of questions, Gwilym, if that's okay, not just one. I'm going to do one question that splits, if that's all right.
Okay, I'm exhaling because he always just ambushes me at this moment.
No, you're going to like this one. You're going to like this one. So I'll ask Gwilym first, then I'll come to you, and then it comes back to me. And because I get to ask the question, I usually ask a question that I've got an interesting answer for. I've been caught out on the podcast before by someone who then had the most amazing story ever.
Oh, with the sunken ship and the dead body.
Ship, sunken pirate ship thing.
That came out of nowhere.
so it can go all horribly wrong for me, but bear with it. So I thought I'd get us back to television, because that's where we started. Yeah. So 2 questions about television, Gwilym. The first, what's the first program or thing you can ever remember experiencing with the television? What's it? Hang on, don't answer it yet.
Oh.
And the second, what's the most interesting thing that's ever happened with you on a television?
I know you've got some story about you and the telly. It's not fair. Right, I'll give the first one very quickly, and the second one I've got an answer to. The first one, it's a toss up between Bagpuss and the Pink Panther.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And interestingly, this is in Wolverhampton in the early 70s, and we had a black and white telly, but I thought we had a colour telly because I knew that the Pink Panther was pink. So I overlaid the colour onto it, but I didn't know. I always thought Bagpuss was grey because he doesn't have his colour in his name. So an interesting way that children process all the information. And then the most interesting thing, whatever it was from the telly, that's a horrible question. But I do remember when I was a bit older, my dad bought me, I don't quite know why, because I didn't get that many presents, but for some reason he bought me the most amazing piece of kit, which is a box with those little mini TVs they had in the 80s, and it had a tape recorder on it and had a radio on it, and it was just fantastic. And I used to put it up in my room and just watch the little TV screen. Very happy memories. That's the best I can do.
That's so sweet. You almost put a tear to my eye. Go on then, Niki, so it's your chance. First TV experience, most unusual experience with a TV.
Okay, so I think there's 3. I'll say 3.
Oh, great! That's brilliant.
So, Sesame Street. I still refer to Sesame. I've given a talk and I made everyone say the Sesame. My talk comes to you by the letter I, E, and T,
Yeah.
and by number 3. So I loved that line. So Sesame Street, because it's so informative, so creative, and it just, just gives you something to look forward to, like numbers and things like that. Always love numbers. The second one isn't a TV show. It's Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, the movie.
Terrifying film.
I loved Chitty Chitty Bang Bang because I thought I'd one day make a flying car as well, because I thought, that was for me the start of the engineering, really, to think, okay, someone could make something, could make lollipops and could make cars, flying cars, amazing. So for me those are the two. The most interesting thing was I broke the TV because I'd been kind of poking at it and doing all sorts, and my dad turned on the telly and it didn't work. And straight away, obviously, because I'm the youngest, it was my siblings were to blame. And I carried on breaking other things after that because I knew that I'd never be caught. And I remember doing a video about engineering, and I talked about breaking the TV, and my dad was like, so it was in my 30s, and my dad was like, so it was you that broke the TV at that time, because no one would say, and he just assumed it was straight away. He assumed it was my brother that must have broken the TV. But yeah,
of course, it's got to be the boy, hasn't it?
Yes.
It's got to be. So my earliest memory of ever seeing anything on TV was the moon landings. So I'd have been just coming up to 3, I think, ish, something like that then. And I remember it for 2 reasons. I remember it because of the moon landings, but I also managed to get, and this isn't my interesting TV story, I also managed to get, I needed to go to A&E because I was like a 3, I had teeth and all the sorts of things that you've got as a kind of 3-year-old toddler. And I had one of those dinky crane toys. And whilst I was watching the moon landings, I was like sucking on the little hook thing on the and I managed to get it stuck kind of like through 2 teeth. And so I remember my granddad having to, because my granddad was like the driver in the family. He had a car because not many people had cars back in the dark ages. And I remember him having to kind of like hold me in the car, kind of hold the dinky toy up while he was driving so that I didn't have the weight of it kind of hanging and stuff like that. I've got some fascinating stories about my granddad taking me to hospital for another podcast, Gwilym. But my kind of, and this is a bit of like a mechanical story. So we weren't very well off, as kind of we've talked about before on the podcast when I was a lad. So we had to pay as you use our TV. It had one of those coin slot things on the front of it. 10 bob to start with, I think, 50 pence pieces. And I'm going to have to apologise to my parents now, because very often come collection day, there was never quite enough money in the payment box to pay for the use of the TV in that month or quarter or whatever it was. And it might be because I'd worked out how to get the payment tray thing out in a way that I could then get it back in. So I didn't take much, like 50p every now and then, just to go and get a packet of sweets or some such thing. So yeah, I did. I used to filter money out of the kind of prepay TV thingamajiggy.
That's some good engineering skills there.
We used to have a pile of £1 coins, which kept diminishing for a slot. And it turned out one of my lads, my older kids, was pinching it, taking it to school and buying sausage rolls for breakfast.
How outrageous.
It was great. He just, where's the money going? And he's just like pocketing a little bit every day, getting himself a sausage roll. It's ridiculous.
Amazing.
Nico, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's amazing work that you're doing, and we really must. If it's okay, can we follow on the conversation?
Oh, definitely.
See if we can become more involved, because it's
yes, definitely,
absolutely in our bag, and I'm sure there's lots we can do together.
Definitely. Thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed being on here.
It's been a delight. Gwilym, just before we go, I need to remind people who are listening, of course, that you now have the capacity. We've always had the capacity, but we didn't used to ask to do a little review on iTunes, on Buzzsprout, on wherever it is you take your podcast from. And if you do pop a little review on there, it means that more people find out about us and we grow our listenership. And who knows, we might get to the dizzy heights where we have enough listeners that we can get a bit of sponsorship in, and then you and I can retire.
That'll be good. We can become famous.
Yeah. Thanks both.